Hello everyone, welcome to another video. Today I thought we'd focus on pronunciation from the perspective of a musician. So if you're new to my new channel, I'm a professional musician living in Japan. And if I may dare say, as a musician, I do have a reputation as someone who got pretty good at hearing very subtle details in music that many musicians often don't notice, and I applied this skill to Japanese as well. Before we start, please like, please subscribe, please leave a comment. It would make such a huge difference for me. I'm hoping that this new channel can be a new source of income for me on top of music, because life in Japan ain't easy. Okay, let's get started. So the goal of this video is not to have perfect pronunciation like a Japanese person. I don't even know if that's worth pursuing. Of course, it doesn't hurt to try to do your best to sound as good as possible, and that's what we're aiming for, to clean up our pronunciation as much as possible so that people can understand us very clearly. So when it comes to Japanese pronunciation, maybe some of you who have been studying for a while, you have heard of pitch accent. It's something that a lot of Japanese teachers or YouTubers are talking about. I think that's great stuff. But beyond that basic pronunciation, there are certain things that I thought are worth talking about. So about this pitch accent thing, one thing that's worth noting is that the average Japanese person is not aware of the technical terms when it comes to pitch accent. In Japanese, it's called kote accento. But like I said, the average Japanese person does not know this term and all these technical terms. They're not important. And I want everything to be as practical as possible. The concept of pitch accent should have its own dedicated video. This video is more about sound production. Right now, I just want to introduce you to the concept in case you're not aware of it. So let's take a word like kirei. Kirei means beautiful. I hear a lot of non-native Japanese speakers, myself included in the beginning, say kirei, kirei. So in the standard dialect, it's pronounced high pitch to low pitch. Ki re. I'm going to exaggerate. Ki re. Kire. Whereas a lot of non-native speakers make the mistake of saying ki re. So you have those two syllables, they go from low to high. In standard dialect, it's actually high to low. Let's take another word that is often used as an example. Hashi, which means chopsticks. So that's high to low. Hashi. Then you have hashi, low to high, which means bridge. It could also mean something else, but for now, let's just say bridge. So this phenomenon exists, and it's one of the key components in being able to speak clear Japanese. But it's not the only thing. And like I said, most Japanese people know this naturally. They don't really learn it in school. In school, they might learn to differentiate certain words like I said earlier, hashi, but in general, it's something that comes naturally to them because they've been exposed to the language since the very beginning. In fact, when you recite the Japanese alphabet, hiragana, there's pitch accent, there's a melody to it. It's not just a, I, u, e, o. It's a, I, u, e, o, a, I, u, e, o. And the pitch is relative to what came before. So if I start on a different pitch, starting like instead of a, I, u, I say a, I, u, e, o, it's still the same relative pitch. So it basically starts this way. You choose a pitch, a, then you go up, I, stay on that pitch, u, go back down, e, and how far you want to go, it's up to you, but not too low. Then you go back up, o. I don't know if I did that correctly, but let me slow it down. Low, high, high, low, high. So here I greatly exaggerated the difference in pitches, but like I said, it can be very subtle. A, I, u, e, o, a, I, u, e, o. Low, high, high, low, high. And it's interesting to note that's when you're reciting the alphabet. But if you're separating each letter, you don't necessarily have to sing the melody. Instead of a, I, u, e, o, you can separate them like a, pause, I, pause, u, pause, e, pause. O. So if I do everything in succession, it ends up being the same pitch. A, I, U, E, O. So this would be in the context of isolating each hiragana. For example, when you're teaching someone like the hiragana. So the first one is A, the next one is I, like that. But if you're actually reciting it, there's the melody. A, I, U, E, O, kakiku, keiko, etc. Remember how I said most Japanese learn this naturally without even realizing it? So I want to share with you this funny clip. It's a YouTube teacher teaching how to recite the hiragana. And at one point you have these three sets, ya, yu, yo, which would be ya, yu, yo. But she says ya, yu, yo. She went down at the end and she realizes she made a mistake. She heard it and she corrected herself. Look at her eyes.
Ya, yu, yo. Ya, yu, yo.
And in my opinion, when she corrects herself, she exaggerates the last one. Let's hear another Japanese person, a YouTuber, this time a child, say it naturally.
Ya, yu, yo, ba, o,
So basically, just for fun, if you want to recite the hiragana, katakana, it goes a, I, U, E, O. It's in groups of 5, except for at the end you have ya, yu, yo, just 3, and also wa, o. So basically, in each group, it starts out with a lower pitch and it rises. One more time, the pattern is low, high, high, low, high. And if it's just 3, low, high, high. Fascinating, isn't it? But that's not what this video is about. We're just going to talk about pronunciation. And what I want to talk about is there's sometimes this idea, even if you ask AI, is Japanese pronounced the way you read it, the way you voice the hiragana and the katakana when you recite them? And people will say generally yes. And it's true, generally it's a good starting point. But there are exceptions, and this video is about those exceptions. My biggest recommendation when it comes to pronunciation is just to listen to native Japanese speakers and do your best to copy what you hear. And don't worry about the rules. There are rules, there are technical terms that the average Japanese person is not aware of. Like I said, they speak it naturally, and I suggest you learn it that way too. And I've noticed sometimes in learning materials that have audio components, they tend to kind of exaggerate the pronunciation to make it extra clean, and they sound like a TV announcer or something. They sound so clear and so good that you think that you can understand Japanese until you speak to real Japanese people. Suddenly you realize, I don't understand what they're talking about. What's the difference? The difference is that the Japanese people are speaking, well, let's just say directly, the real Japanese. And one very important thing that I should say is that Japanese is an evolving language, and there are of course many dialects, and sometimes people have their own peculiar habits. Sometimes older people have slightly different pronunciation, not necessarily so, but it is something that I have noticed. And the first one we're going to start with is this U character. Generally speaking, I think it's pronounced U, and we're going to use a word, sugu. It's not the U sound in English, and also French people seem to have trouble with this one as well. French people tend to say U or U, sugu, or sugu, sugu, sugu. It's actually in between. Sugu, 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 sugu. I recommend that you record yourself saying it and listen to me say it again. Sugu, sugu, sugu. Not sugu and not sugu. Sugu, sugu, sugu. 우롱차, kudamono. Not kudamono and not kyudamono. That's a pronunciation that I hear French people often make. So while on the topic of this U sound, let's look at SU, su. As I said earlier, sugu. However, it's not like a Lego piece. when you say, for example, 私はカナダ人です. You don't say です. です. You just say です. です. However, never say never. Sometimes, to be more dramatic or cutesy, some people will say 私はカナダ人です. In that case, yeah, you can say です like a Lego piece. You just attach it. But in general, when it's at the end, you just remove the you. 日本人です. ありがとうございます. Now, in certain occasions, often with older people, very rarely, but I have encountered this, I have heard some people, instead of using the u pronunciation that I taught you, they have something closer to u. Sugu. Sugu. In fact, I'm not going to share here because I'm not here to point fingers, but there's actually a Japanese YouTube teacher. For some reason, all her u sounds are u. And when I show this to other Japanese people, they're wondering, well, maybe she has a habit or it's true. It's definitely not what we're used to hearing. All this to say, people can have their own quirks, so it's not necessarily a big deal. Next one. And again, this Japanese YouTube teacher also makes this, I don't want to say mistake. She's Japanese. I'm not. Who am I to make these judgments, right? But like I said, I'm a musician with very, very sensitive ears, so I notice these things, and that's what I'm pointing out here. But let's take the word that I showed you earlier, kirei. It's spelled Kirei, and you would think it's kirei, kirei, but actually it's pronounced kirei, kirei. You make the last vowel sound longer, you extend it. It's not kirei, but I don't know why. Maybe it's because she wants to teach, make it clearer for the students, but I think it's confusing. But she was pronouncing it every time kirei. And when I asked a lot of when I showed this video to Japanese people, it's like, yeah, it's a little bit strange. Normally, it should be kirei. Same thing with arigato. It's spelled arigatou. There's a U, but it's not arigatou. Arigatou. It's actually arigato. You extend the O a little bit. Arigato. It's the same with the word Tokyo. It's not toukyo. It's Tokyo. You take the O sound and you just extend it a little bit. So this phenomenon occurs very, very often. However, let's talk about exceptions. Sometimes you would say toukyo. In which situation do you think? Well, for example, if you're teaching someone how to spell a word and you want to make everything clear, then yes, you would say kirei, toukyo, just to help the person spell it. One more word. Eigo, English. Eigo. It's not eigo, it's eigo. You extend the E. Let's go back to that word, arigato. So, sometimes, officially it's spelled arigatou, but sometimes the U is omitted at the end just to make it shorter. Because Japanese people like to say things quickly and short. Arigato. Instead of arigato, it's very subtle. But in, let's say, text messages, you might see people just spell it that way. They are quote-unquote misspelling it on purpose. The same thing happens in other languages. It happens in English and French. People purposely make quote-unquote mistakes for whatever reason. What are you doing? Whatcha doing? WHATCHA, right? The next one is interesting. Japanese doesn't have an official, I guess, hard F sound. F. The closest they have would be FU, or sometimes it's also spelled HU. It's part of the Ha-hi-hu-he-ho category. In fact, on a Romaji keyboard, you can type HU or FU and you'll get the same result. So let's use this word, Fukuoka, which is one of my favorite cities in Japan. In fact, right now, I'm in Fukuoka. In English, you would say Fukuoka. But in Japanese, it's that F is softer. It's almost like you're sighing, like, okay. Fukuoka, Fukuoka, Fukuoka. Another Japanese word, which means like normal, ordinary. Futsu, futsu, futsu. Not necessarily futsu, but futsu, futsu. You're kind of combining H and F, right? But what if you want to use loan words that have F, like final or fashion. So this where you use katakana, and you use this fu sound, and then you attach a tiny vowel next to it. So for example, fashion, fashion. To get this these two characters to appear, if you're typing on a Romaji keyboard, you can type HUXA. The X makes the next vowel smaller, or the next character that comes. So it becomes fa, fa. Or you can simply just type FA. So even with these loan words like fashion, they don't say fashion, they say fashion, fashion, fashion. The F, you can hear it, but it's not so distinct. The next one we're going to look at is from the RA series, Larirurero. So in Japanese, L and R are the same. So it's not Polaroid camera, but Polaroid camera. Polaroid camera. So how would I describe this pronunciation? For me, in terms as an English speaker, it's a soft L sound with a hint of a soft D. Camera, camera. Polaroid camera, Polaroid camera, Polaroid camera, Polaroid camera, Polaroid camera. I think if you lean on the soft L sound, don't worry about the D thing, it's good. Polaroid. But if you have a little hint of D, it's not a big deal either. I sometimes use one or the other. I don't even know if you guys can hear the difference. Polaroid, 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 Polaroid. In certain instances, I was insisting more on the soft L. In other instances, there was a little hint of a D sound. One more time. L, Polaroid, a little bit of D, Polaroid. Do you hear a difference? If not, no big deal. So that would be the R series. I guess what I'm doing is I'm kind of flicking the tongue off the top of my teeth, the top part. Larirurero, 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 larirurero. The next one is this unique N sound. Let's look at this word. Maybe. Tabun. Tabun. Can you hear it? Tabun. That N sound is very, very subtle. Tabun. However, in certain instances, I've heard people exaggerate it a little bit. I don't know, just to give emphasis. Instead of tabun, they say tabun, tabun. The word for foreigner, gaikokujin, gaikokujin. So that N sound is very subtle at the end, gaikokujin. So with this N character, you have different situations where the pronunciation may change. You guys know tempura in Japanese? Well, it's a Japanese word. Tempura. Actually, it came from Portuguese apparently. But anyway, in Japanese, it's tempura. But when you write it in Romaji, people tend to write it T-E-M-P-U-R-A. Now again, there are technical rules for this, but the truth is, most people can't even tell the difference. It's the same thing with the word senpai. Apparently, according to the technical rules, it's S-E-M-P-A-I. Senpai. But the real truth, in my opinion, is that it's so subtle that people can't distinguish between the two. It's said so, the sound is produced so subtly, like in tabun, right? You don't say, well, except for that exaggerated instance where I said tabun, but it's tabun. So, senpai, tempura. Do you hear a difference? No, right? In fact, let me do it again. I'm going to use the N sound now. Senpai, tempura. Now I'm going to use the M sound. Senpai, tempura. The difference is barely noticeable. In fact, I would say it's not noticeable. So that it doesn't matter. Okay, one more example with this N sound. Two words. Tonkotsu and ninki. Tonkotsu is literally pig bones, pork bones. And ninki means popular. So, tonkotsu would be T-O-N-K-O-T-S-U. And when you say in this context, it kind of has a NG, English NG sound to it. Song. Tonkotsu. Very subtle. Tonkotsu. Same thing with ninki. almost like N-I-N-G in English. Ninki, ninki, tonkotsu. One more common word with this same phenomenon. Genki means healthy or energetic. So it's kind of like an English NG sound to it. G-E-N-K-I, but that N has a soft G attached to it. Genki. Genki desu ka? Ah, genki da yo. From this N sound, we're going to seg into the G sound. So the series that go ga, gi, gu, ge, go. So that example that I gave earlier, G-E, genki. So the G is not too hard in my opinion. Kind of a medium accented G, genki. Another word, gaikokujin, foreigner. That's the word I used earlier. Gaikokujin. So don't make the G too like exaggerate, like gaikokujin, genki, gohan. Now, if it's part of a word, if this G sound is part of a word where it's preceded by an N sound, the pronunciation becomes much softer. So the word for human is N-I-N-G-E-N. So if I use a hard pronunciation, it'll be ni-gen, but it's actually ningen, ningen. You don't make gen, you make ngen, ningen. Well, you don't have to make it that soft, but you don't make it hard. Ningen, 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 ningen. I try to vary the hardness. As long as it's not as hard as the usual gen, you're probably good. Another word with the same phenomenon, shotengai, shotengai. So at the end you have, well, S-H-O-U in Romaji will be maybe S-H-O-U-T-E-N-G-A-I. So you have this gai sound, but because it has an N before, it becomes gai, softer. Shotengai, shotengai, shotengai. Not shotengai, but shotengai, softer. However, the same phenomenon may still occur even if it's not preceded by the N sound. Like there's the word sugoi, which means amazing. Sometimes, I guess for dramatic effect, people sugoi, sugoi. So earlier, you know how I said in certain educational materials that have audio examples, it sounds too good and too clean. So if you're training to become a TV announcer or radio announcer, something like that, you take courses in pronunciation. And again, there are technical terms for all of this, but actually in, I guess, older Japanese, the G sound is sometimes softer regardless of whether there's an N sound before or not. One such word would be England, which in Japanese is igirisu. I-G-I-R-I-S-U. Igirisu. Igirisu. Now, according to the official pronunciation guide, it should be igirisu. But the truth is, most Japanese and even presenters, I actually looked this up on YouTube. I watched a few news segments about England. A lot of presenters ignored the official pronunciation and they just said igirisu, igirisu. They still have a somewhat hard G. So if you hear both, it's not a big deal. It also happens with the particle ga. Watashi ga instead of watashi ga. But the truth is, in day-to-day life Japanese, I almost never hear watashi ga, watashi ga. I often just hear watashi ga, watashi ga. It's not every Japanese person who does this, but people who specifically study pronunciation, maybe in order to become Japanese teachers or presenters or something like that, a lot of them may still ignore, quote-unquote, the rules. So instead of watashi ga, they'll still say watashi ga. You can hear both. But in day-to-day life, I don't want to say only, but I mainly only hear ga, watashi ga. Next one is from the za series. Za, ji, zu, ze, zo. So it's actually not za, zi, zu, ze, zo. It's za, ji, zu, ze, zo. So let's take the word oji-san, oji-san, which means uncle or older person, Mr. Oji-san. See, it's a kind of a J sound, oji-san. Or another word, jinja, jinja, which is a Japanese shrine, jinja. Again, J, hard J. Now, let's look at an interesting phenomenon. Let's look at loan words. Look at this word, which is using this character in katakana, of course, but it's the G sound in katakana form. And the word musician. And I asked some Japanese people to say the word without telling them what I was looking for. And practically all of them said musician. They softened the J, musician, because they know in English it's musician. So they approximated that sound, musician. And then when I pointed out what I wanted to hear, they said, oh no, I said musician. Musician. No man, you're not gonna trick my ears. I'm a musician. I tricked you. I heard you say musician. And I'm gonna prove it to you now. We're gonna go on YouTube. I'm gonna slow things down. I'm gonna record a few different musicians' YouTube channels, music YouTube channels of people saying jazz musician. So it's interesting. Jazz, it's an English word. I'm a jazz musician, by the way. Jazz is the same G sound, then musician. So in other words, they're using the same character, but depending on the word, the pronunciation changes based on the original English pronunciation.
ジャズミュージシャンならジャズミュージシャンね年上のミュージシャンと共演
ジャズミュージシャンか
So this video is not about pitch accent, but I don't know if you noticed it. Listen again to those 4 different examples. The word musician, the pitch accent varied a little bit. So it's a very interesting phenomenon. Again, that's for another video. Like, subscribe, and be on the lookout for that video. But you see, when they say jazz, it's a hard J. But when they say musician, it's suddenly a soft Z, like a musician. Musician. Jazz musician. Jazz musician. Let's look at one more word, New Zealand, the country. Now you have the same spelling, the G sound, but let's listen to how the average Japanese person pronounces the word. Do they say New G or do they say New Z? Let's check it out.
ニュージーランドに移住して分かったデメリット
ニュージーランドに行ってきます
Interesting, isn't it? Now again, I've tricked some Japanese because for them, it's all subconscious. When I made them very conscious about it, they would say that the pronunciation should be New G. But when they say it subconsciously, it ends up being New Z. Very interesting. The spelling and pronunciation of foreign, of loan words is an interesting topic of its own as well. I can make another video about that as well. But I think you get the point that I was trying to make. It's good to have a starting point. Yes, reciting the hiragana and katakana is good. You start there. But don't put all your faith into it. Listen to the average Japanese speaker. Try to notice the similarities, the difference between the audio examples in your textbooks, the age of the person, the gender of the person, the region where you might be. People have slightly different accents in different regions, and learn that way, naturally. In this video, I pointed out, I think, the biggest, exceptions that I could think of, and there are others, of course. As you study the language, you'll probably encounter them yourselves. I just wanted you guys to be aware of said exceptions, that not everything is set in stone. So, good luck.